Donald Trump on his first day of office decide, we're going to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America now. Google played ball, Apple played ball, etc. Associated Press decided, no, we are not going to call it that. So then Trump White House started saying, we're not going to allow the Associated Press reporters to be part of the press pool.
Welcome to The Debrief, where we talk with the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering and where the story's going next. I'm Sarah Bedford, and I'm here with commentary editor Conn Carroll. Conn, the House finally passed this one big, beautiful bill that we've been hearing so much about. House Speaker Mike Johnson had to do a lot of wrangling to get this over the finish line, right? Does this show that this narrow GOP majority can, in fact, govern?
I hate to correct you, but the big, beautiful bill actually hasn't passed yet. So this is actually an even
resolution
earlier step. Well, it's a key point, because a lot of people say, in fact, I think it was Marjorie Taylor Greene or Nancy Mace, one of them, tweeted out that, we've now passed Trump's no tax on tips, right? Which is just not true. Could no tax on tips happen in the later writing of this bill? Yes, but essentially this bill is basically instruction to different committees in the House to actually come up with the legislation. It is not the legislation that exists. So this is a huge step. It's a big deal. This is a huge step towards the writing of the bill, but the big, beautiful bill actually does not quite exist yet.
Well, so that gets me to my next question, which is, what happens next? Senate Republicans have been doing their own thing and are not necessarily happy with how much House Republicans are trying to pack into this resolution, right?
Right. Yes. Yes and no in a way. Yes, in the sense that they want to do two bills. They want to do a first bill that focuses just on border security and defense, and then they want to come back and do a second bill that just deals with taxes. But their criticism of this House bill is not necessarily that they've combined the two, it's that the tax portion doesn't include everything that they want. Specifically, the Senate Republicans want to make sure that there's enough tax cuts in the bill to make the Trump tax cuts from 2017 permanent. Because of under the budget reconciliation bills, that has to be paid for over a certain 10 years, and the House bill doesn't put enough room for tax cuts to allow a permanent extension. So it's the fact that the House did not include enough tax cuts in the bill that is making the Senate upset with the House version.
Now, shifting gears a little bit, the White House has made the decision to take over assignment of the press pool, the small group of journalists that go into the Oval Office and Air Force One spaces where not everybody can fit. This has caused a conniption.
I think that's
the Washington
fair.
press corps. Was this a smart move by Donald Trump, or politically was this a fight he didn't really need to pick?
So this was a fight basically picked by the Associated Press in particular. So you had Donald Trump on his first day of office decide, we're going to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America now. Google played ball, Apple played ball, etc. Associated Press decided, no, we are not going to call it that. So then Trump White House started saying, we're not going to allow the Associated Press reporters to be part of the press pool. The Associated Press then went to federal court and said that violates the First Amendment. The White House Correspondent Association has assigned us as a press pool representative, therefore you have to let us in. And so the Trump administration basically looked at that complaint and said, you know what, why do we allow the White House Correspondents Association to pick the press pool? How about we just stop doing that? So the impetus of this actually is the Associated Press lawsuit, which is why it suddenly came this week. But I mean, it does appear that Trump is on, solid grounds. There's a First Amendment right to say what you want, but there's no First Amendment right for anyone to access the White House. So they do have the right to decide who can come in and cover the president. And it does appear that going forward, they're going to be selecting which journalists are allowed into those certain spaces.
But do you think politically this is a good idea for Donald Trump? Because on the one hand, you could say forcing Democrats and Trump's opponents to defend super unpopular institutions like the legacy media helps him. On the other hand, he's doing so much other stuff. Why invite this criticism when it was working fine, more or less,
Right. So I do think Trump has been blessed, let's be honest, with good enemies, or bad enemies, just as you put it, in that the Associated Press has a long track record of blatant leftist ideology pushing. They call it gender affirming healthcare for transgender stuff, right? They have outlawed the use of the term illegal immigrant because that is derisive, they decided, to migrants. There's a whole slew of decisions that they, in the word choices they make in their style guide, that is always pushing left, always pushing the Democratic agenda. And at some point, the Republicans should be able to push back and say, look, if you're going to constantly play word games that the Democrats want you to play, and you're never going to use the language we want to, then we're just not going to play ball with you anymore. That's a perfectly reasonable pushback for me. And I think an even better battle is the larger press. I mean, you have a national media that has just whiffed on the origin of COVIDs, saying that did not come from China when it clearly did. They whiffed on Biden's mental decline, showing that he was not, saying that he was perfectly fine when we all saw in the debate that he wasn't. And they, for years, said that there was no crisis on the southern border when clearly there was. The national media just has such a low credibility that Trump can go ahead and pick this fight on a politically advantageous ground.
Well, Conn, thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely.
You can get more writing from Conn and the rest of the commentary team at washingtonexaminer.com.